water's coming. It's coming in this one room. We're all got sandbags. I need to fill up this room. If people just start throwing sandbags all over, the water's going to come. We're going to all drown.
That's a very good analogy. I like that. You find your biggest rock. The number one thing that's the most pain point.
Otherwise, you're just like 20% here, 30% here. It's not going to work.
Because until you start getting those processes wrote down and then you build accountability behind those processes, nothing's ever going to change.
America's backbone was built on blue-collar business grit, grind, and muscle. This is where you stop working for the business, and the business starts working for you.
Blue Collar Millionaires, we're in Phoenix, Arizona. Chris and I doing a podcast, got a big dinner tonight. But we're going to shoot some podcasts right now. Chris, what are we talking about?
Man, we're going to talk about how business is nothing but a machine. I've been reading the E-Myth lately. I had a chance to read Ken Goodrich's version of the E-Myth HVAC contractor, and then it made me jump back in and read E-Myth Revisited. And it's such a fantastic book for any entrepreneur. But most individuals leave their W-2 job to go start a business because they're a great technician. They're like, I can do this great. I can do this better. I can have the freedom. And so they jump off and they don't even realize all of the other responsibilities that are required as a business owner. And so the E-Myth kind of describes it as you've got your entrepreneur that's constantly casting new vision and ideas. You've got your manager that's in the past picking up the pieces and trying to put it all in an organized manner. And then you have technician mentality, mindset that is in the now and he's physically doing the task at hand, and that's where they thrive at. And we all function in all three capacities. The problem is most of us spend 70% of our time in that technician role. And this is why we see so many businesses that never hit over $1 million in revenue. And it's because we don't understand the philosophy that really business is just a bunch of processes that create a system. Me personally, I'm still climbing out of that. I still have so many processes that need to get built so that it's scalable, so that it functions fluid, and it's even less reliant on myself. But then we've got other businesses. I think of the main business we have that's just getting rocket fuel growth on it, our windshield business that we're partnered on. And it was pretty much a startup business. And so when we put in 2 operators on it and we start growing it in the manner that we did, we had to ask that question, how do we do this? And I think when someone starts asking the question of how do we do this, you realize how many processes you don't have built.
So look at that business. We added a whole new revenue model on there.
Yeah.
So we've had massive growth because of, that's a whole nother podcast. But when we went there, 2 weeks ago, we were growing so fast. We're literally growing like months every week.
It's huge.
It's going
huge
so
growth.
fast. So that's why I went down there and I said, I'm just going to listen and just watch for a day. And it was clear as day to me what we needed. We need a lot of things to stick with that growth, but it was more CSRs
Yeah.
to handle that onboarding process. We'll get all into that, but it's a little bit complicated and we had to start training them immediately. So I left there on Wednesday. I had the post up on Wednesday night. I was looking at them on Thursday. We were interviewing them Friday and Saturday. On Monday, people were starting. Just to get in the training thing. That's how much I was like, this is going to be a huge problem in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Not in 4 months.
I think we forget there is a process. The problem is we don't sit down and take the time to write it out, because that is most of the time not fun to most entrepreneurs' personalities. But that's the discipline work that allows a business to actually have enterprise value. I loved this as well in the process of reading those 2 books. And the reason it's so relevant to me right now is I just read it last weekend. They were talking about how the systems that you have, that is what's going to be able to allow you to delegate yourself out of the business. But you still have to hold those systems accountable. You have a manager that oversees those systems. And then you as the leader, you're overseeing and making sure that key metrics are being hit. Because if those systems stop producing, then you have to dive back in and you have to start looking at those systems and saying, okay, what are the questions that we need to ask to figure out where the problem is? We learned this with our fractional CFO, and the way we watch how the numbers are going through. And when we see there's a big change, we instantly start saying, what happened here? Why is this happening? And then eventually, so many questions in, you get to, oh, okay, well, we need to answer the how we do this question now. Are we tracking the calls that are coming in, and are we grabbing the information so we can do a follow-up?
I remember I read E-Myth. I think it was like 1996, the first one. I saw that, I read it, and I read it at the end of the year, like November. That's when the landscaping season ends. And I read it one night, and then the whole next day, like I was working, was like, I was so excited. I'm like, this is going to be so much better for me. And I realized what I was doing right and how many things I was doing wrong. I was excited for that winter, and I did a lot of those things. It was definitely a life-altering book.
There's so many levers that you can pull, and what do you feel like is the most important levers? Because just then, you hit the nail on the head, because somebody's probably listening and saying, yeah, I mean, that's great, Chris. Like, you know, if I had the time, I would sit down and I would write my processes. I would answer those questions of how, but I literally show up at the house at night without supper, and it's all I can do is just get into bed, and then I'm waking back up the next morning because I'm so far behind. So how do you step back realistically so that you can say, okay, I'm going to write this SOP out, and I'm going to train this technician on how to follow this particular process, or I'm going to focus on this particular call script, or converting these leads I'm paying for into sales?
I would look at what my personal problem in that business is probably going to be, how do I teach more people to do what I do? That's always been my problem. But other people could be a lead problem. So if you have guys and they know what they're doing, but you're not getting enough leads, then I would say, I need to create processes for this marketing so I can get this machine going. We talked about it's a machine. All my businesses, I always had more leads than I could handle. I have a problem that's very different than a lot of blue collar guys.
Right.
So I was not focused on that, but I feel like in our group, it's a lot of people don't have enough leads.
Yeah.
So I would say, what is my problem? And then I just zero in on that one thing. That's kind of what I was thinking when I went down to the windshield business. I can't help them with 7 things.
Right.
What's the one thing? And I was thinking, what's the one thing in March we got to get going? Because it was middle of March. And then I'll think of one for April. If you just have that thing, then it doesn't sound so daunting. This one, let's just work on this one and buy back your time.
It reminds me of the EOS system when you said that, and in the book Traction, is he talks about the rocks, and he's like, look, you find your biggest rock, the number one thing that's the most pain point, the biggest needle mover, whatever it is, you accomplish that. Then that's set to the side and that's laid in as a base layer. Once you've gotten that rock out of the way, then you bring another one up and you accomplish that. And before you know it, you've got a nice path to drive on, but you got to do it one at a time. Or you're delegating it off to someone competent that has a skill set to be able to handle that, and you're doing check-ins every single
And
day.
I think you should master one thing, like get it perfect. I know a lot of entrepreneurs, you get like something like kind of 60%, and then you're like, let me go work on sales and do this. You know Bobby Castro. Bobby Castro's got a cool book. He's an awesome speaker. He came into our Dealmaker family, and he was so animated, and he was like, he built $1 billion business, right? He had $1 billion exit. So he talked about, hey, you got to look at it like this. I got to get everybody on the team. The water's coming. It's coming in this one room. We're all got sandbags. I need to fill up this room. There's not even like one crack that water can get in. We're going to get all these rooms. I got to get everybody to buy into just this room. And then I'm going to close the door. I'm going to do the next room. But he's like, if people just start throwing sandbags all over, the water's going to come. We're going to all drown.
It's a very good analogy. I like that.
I like that. But he had us all thinking, like, pumped up after that. I didn't do that a lot of times, but I did it better, and now I do it. So when I look at things, I say, what's the one thing? Let's stop water here. Everybody be on board on here. This is what we're doing. For right now, it was getting more people to answer calls, because that's a domino effect. Then it buys back our partners' time.
Right.
They can do more sales and so on. Otherwise, you're just like 20% here, 30% here. It's not going to work.
Yeah. We started hitting a dry spell in one of my businesses, and so I had to get focused on lead generation and the sales process, because when I started realizing, I was like, okay, even the leads we're getting currently, we're not even converting to how we should be converting. And so many times we do act like firefighters. We sit there and we put this fire out and then we jump on the next one, but this is still smoldering. It never completely went out, and it can spark back up with just a little bit of wind. So I agree, knocking down one at a time, but just, I love that question of how do we do this? And if you can't answer that question, you have to answer that question if that's your big rock in your face. Because until you start getting those processes wrote down and then you build accountability behind those processes, nothing's ever going to change.
I agree with all that. Focus on the one thing that matters. Build that process out, and you guys can kill it. E-Myth is a great book. They had the original one, and then they wrote ones for like every industry.
Mm-hmm.
Ken Goodrich wrote the one on HVAC. He's coming to our dinner tonight. We're excited to meet him.
All right, Blue Collar Millionaires, we'll see you next time. Check out bluecollarmillionaire.net. This is where you can find all of our resources. We do these Blue Collar Millionaire dinners where we just get in the room with a bunch of very ambitious entrepreneurs that are willing to do whatever it takes to build great quality relationships and businesses. And then we have Boardroom Elite. If you're looking for more one-on-one and group style coaching, then check that out. Every single week we're on with our Boardroom Elite members, and we're just growing massive enterprises inside of that group. So appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll see you on the next week's
See you next
podcast.
week.